What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, August 25th, 2016. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Before we get into it, I have a little bit of a program note. Tomorrow's show, Friday, is going to be a replay. I have an appointment I cannot shift. In fact, the person is literally flying into Honolulu Airport and then back out, so I really can't avoid that, and it's right on top of the normal broadcast time. So my apologies to everybody, but we'll be back live on Monday. So a reminder, tomorrow's show is a best of, but tune in anyway because we say cool things on this program. Okay, now Hillary Clinton is out there doing her speechifying, and that little exercise I recommend about turn off the volume and watch her face and body language really works, because we can see on her face that look of absolute entitlement to the White House is now gone. And she's out there making some very, very reckless statements. She said one thing out there where Trump started the birther nonsense against Barack Obama, that he was out there pushing this whole thing. No, he wasn't. And we did a repost to this story about how the Washington Post confirmed all this nonsense about Barack Obama not being born in the United States came out of the Hillary Clinton campaign back in 2008. And they have the memos from Clinton's campaign chief strategist rather. So she's still lying. She doesn't understand that the more she lies, the more people are going to turn against her. One of the other statements she made out there is how the alt-right has taken over the GOP. Well, if there's more of the alt-right than anybody else, then shouldn't they take over the GOP? Isn't that democracy? If the vast majority of Americans think Hillary Clinton is a crook and they want Donald Trump, isn't that how democracy is supposed to work? And then Hillary went on to say that Donald Trump wants to make America hate again. She's back pushing this whole racism and feminism issue. In fact, to sum up Hillary's entire presentation today, it was nothing but thin platitudes and vague allegations. There was almost nothing of real substance in there at all. Now, over at WikiLeaks, Julian Assange is more than a little upset at what appears to have been an attempt to end his life earlier in the week. And he's out there saying that he is going to be releasing more devastating information about Hillary, not just before the election in November, but before the debates begin end of next month. Basically, a month from now is when the debates start. And Assange says he's going to be releasing a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm expecting that Ecuadorian embassy in London to be destroyed by a mysterious explosion. Gee, it must have been a leak in the gas main, or some Arab who was upset over this movie that bashed Muslims went in and destroyed the Ecuadorian embassy, and Julian Assange with it. But more and more information keeps coming on out. And about the only thing that can be said that's positive about all of this is we're watching the establishment as a whole and the corporate media, which is obviously part of the establishment, literally destroy itself trying to prop up Hillary Clinton. Because as she goes down, they go down with her. One of the stories that is floating around there about the pay-for-play scandal, and it is illegal. It's a violation of all kinds of laws. Over in Bahrain, Crown Prince Salman of Bahrain donated $150,000 directly to the Clinton Foundation, another $32 million to the Clinton Global Initiative, after which he got his meeting with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, after which she approved some highly controversial arms sales to Bahrain. Now, Hillary is still out there, even today on her speech, she's fighting for women. She's a champion of women, except for that trailer trash that was accusing her husband of sexual assault. Meanwhile, she took $25 million from Saudi Arabia, where women aren't even allowed to drive a car. So how is she fighting for women when she's taking money from one of the worst cultural abusers of women that are out there. And all over the independent media, and now starting to encroach on the outer edges of the corporate media, we're seeing this hue and cry. This has gone on far enough. We know there's bribery. We know there's corruption. We know there's far worse going on. We know there's racketeering. It's time to do something about it. Even Natural News, which normally devotes itself to health issues, obviously, is out there saying it's time for a trial. It's time for an independent prosecutor. This has gone on far, far enough. Story out of Sputnik News, pay for play, Clinton Foundation finds itself amid fresh email scandal. And were it anybody but the Clintons, they would have been prosecuted for all this corruption years and years ago. But the Clintons are protected. They can blackmail the entire U.S. government because the Clintons and the Bush, this duopoly, this narcocracy, goes all the way back to that CIA gun and drug running operation into Nicaragua in the 1980s. And the U.S. end of that pipeline was Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton. And everybody tied up with the drug running and the money laundering and the arms manufacture. They got very, very rich. They got enough money to literally buy and bribe their way to higher levels of power. This is a repeat of what happened during Prohibition. And the narcocracy does not want to let go. And that's why we're seeing this bizarre, obvious behavior from career politicians and the corporate media. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network at this particular time. And as is usually the case, we're talking about politics in this first hour. And for our on-air affiliates, just a quick reminder, tomorrow's show will be a replay. I'm unavailable for the live broadcast, but tune in anyway because we talk about all kinds of interesting things, even in the past. What do we want? Time travel. When do we want it? Yesterday. Now then, once again, Hillary Clinton has been exposed as a complete liar because Hillary came on out and tried to claim that she had no idea that any of her aides at the State Department were in any way involved with the Clinton Foundation. We know that Huma Abedin had that special government employee status where she was getting paychecks from both organizations. So we're looking at this article that came out of Information Liberation saying that the emails show clearly Hillary knew her aides at the State Department were coordinating with the Clinton Foundation. This despite her pledge on becoming Secretary of State that she was going to distance herself from the foundation and maintain that ethical barrier, which lasted all of 3.5 seconds. Rudy Giuliani came out. He's actually a funny guy. Came out with a comment. He's down there in Florida with the Donald Trump rally, and they're talking about Donald Trump's huge crowds. And Hillary just can't get people to show up anymore. And Giuliani said the only enthusiastic crowd Hillary can draw now would be a grand jury. And that is absolutely, absolutely right. Now, Hillary is out there trying to find some way to deflect this. She can't address the facts in the emails. She can't address the fact that she did commit perjury before the Congress. So she's back to platitudes and sound bites. She's out there saying, I know there's a lot of smoke, but there's no fire. At least until they decide to burn the Clinton Foundation down and blame it all on some Mohammed-bashing movie, because that's how they get rid of evidence of what's going on. Now, Hillary Clinton did a phone call into Anderson Cooper on CNN, and Hillary Clinton actually has declared that this one phone call to this one CNN news reader constitutes a press conference. So please stop talking about how she hasn't had a press conference in so many months. She just had one. She called Anderson Cooper, and that was it. And Anderson Cooper actually put her on the spot about payments to the Clinton Foundation, and Hillary Clinton actually lost her cool. And anybody who understands politics and political campaigns, you understand that losing your cool is a very bad thing to do where people can see you. Now, we know Hillary is legendary for her temper in private. She loves to throw things. But you don't do it in front of the voters, because voters do not want somebody who can be provoked to anger holding the keys to the nuclear weapons. And Hillary lost it when talking with Anderson Cooper. And people are looking at her response to all these questions about the Clinton Foundation and realizing her answers don't make any sense. One of the questions that has provoked Hillary to near anger in the past is, why are you talking about ethical restrictions on the Clinton Foundation now? Why weren't they there before as Secretary of State? And, of course, Hillary said they would be there, but they never were. And Hillary actually can't answer that question, why aren't these ethical restrictions have been part of the foundation all along? And so she's thrashing around and she's giving out this impression. She really doesn't have an answer for any of this stuff. She really, really doesn't. She's in trouble. Like I said, on that little rally that she had today, turn down the volume, look at her face. Up until just about 2 months ago, when you looked at Hillary, you saw that look of absolute certainty the White House was going to be hers. And that look is now gone. Now, buried among all of these documents and paperwork regarding the Clinton Foundation that's coming on out, there's a limited liability company that has surfaced, WJC, the initials of William Jefferson Clinton. And what's odd about this company is it's owned by Bill Clinton. It has no employees. It has no assets. In other words, it's a shell company, exactly like those used by drug cartels and other criminal enterprises to launder money to avoid law enforcement detection. I mean, it's huge. I think probably a lot of people are reaching the point of saying it just can't be that bad. It just can't be that corrupt. Yeah, it can. And it is. And you're going to have to come to grips with that if we're going to have a chance to save this country. You have to acknowledge just how corrupt and evil our ruling class really is. Assassinations, drug running, drug money laundering. If there's a buck in it, they're going to do it. Now, Huma Abedin is coming under more and more scrutiny from her emails. And basically, they're finding more and more pay dirt about the pay for play in Huma Abedin's emails. And they're starting to bring some focus onto her. Remember, we know from Huma Abedin's own emails that she also recklessly, negligently exposed national secrets to unauthorized people by leaving them on the front seat of her car. Now, I have 2 words for Huma Abedin, if she or any of her friends are listening. Ron Brown. Because remember, Ron Brown was at the heart of the pay-for-play scandal involving the Commerce Department under President Bill Clinton. And he was about to testify, and he died in that strange plane crash. So, Huma, good advice here. You better turn state's evidence while you still can. Because look at what happened after Bill Clinton won the White House. How many of their associates met strange, sudden ends. Because Bill Clinton needed to clean house and get rid of everybody who knew just how he had stolen that election. Now, everyone's talking about this EpiPens scandal. It's another one of these situations where a company buys a very necessary, important medication and then ramps the price up by multiple times to gouge the patients who are dependent on that medication. And it turns out the company that is gouging the price of EpiPens, whose CEO just got a huge boost in salary and benefits, that company is a Clinton Foundation donor. More than that, they're a partner. They're back in 2009. They partnered with the Clinton Foundation to produce 4 new HIV drugs. They're in it up to their necks. Now, as I mentioned before, Hillary's out there talking about the alt-right, which I think she means alternative right or alternate right. It's a pejorative, like the vast right-wing conspiracy. We're supposed to just automatically think these are bad people because of the hyphenated name. And what Hillary is saying is that the alt-right has taken over the GOP. Well, if the alt-right is the majority, They're supposed to take over. That's how democracy works. And right now, what they're signaling here is that Hillary's campaign from now until the election is all going to be about race baiting and how Donald Trump and his supporters are white supremacists and they hate women and they want to go back to the plantations and women not allowed to vote, barefoot and pregnant and all the rest of that stuff. And it's so over the top, it's not really getting traction. Trump is actually gaining among black voters along with the Latino voters because there's only so much bovine excrement that can be flung at a voter before they start to recognize the smell. And what Hillary's strategy appears to be, and it's a desperation ploy, she's going to try and run out the clock. She and her lawyers are going to try and just ignore and downplay the health issues and delay the email issue. They're already over there trying to delay the release of any more of these emails until after the election because the emails might unfairly bias the voters against Hillary Clinton. Well, you know, if she did what she did, and she did, we, the American people, have a right to know about it before we go to the voting booths. Because what's going to happen if they succeed in clamping down on all this independent information and Hillary steals the White House, do you really think she's going to make it through to the end of her first 4-year term? It's going to be another Richard Nixon impeachment. Because the American people are going to be very, very angry that their noses are being rubbed in the face that they no longer run this country. And being president is not going to make Hillary's crimes go away. Even if Obama grants her a pardon for all crimes past and future, which, by the way, I'm not sure that can really work. It's unclear whether Hillary can pardon herself. And if she were to do so, that would only hammer home the point we're living in a dictatorship, where there's the little people who obey the laws and pay the taxes, and then there are the rulers who just do whatever the heck they want. And that's the way the world is supposed to be. It's like being teleported back to the Middle Ages. But right now, that seems to be Hillary's only strategy. Just delay, try and run out the clock before November when they're going to steal this election. Now, I want to go back and hit a very important point, and that is Title 18, Section 793. And I'm going to read you a direct quote. Whoever being entrusted with or having lawful possession or control of any document, writing, code book, signal book, sketch, photograph, photographic negative, blueprint, plan, map, model, instrument, appliance, note, or information relating to the national defense through gross negligence permits the same to be removed from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of his trust or to be lost, stolen, abstracted, or destroyed shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 10 years or both. And I wanted to hit this once again because Hillary's defenders are out there still pointing to how FBI Director James Comey, former member of the board of drug money laundering bank HSBC, came on out and said that no reasonable prosecutor would ever bring charges against Hillary because she did not intend to do wrong. Well, no reasonable prosecutor is going to bring charges against Hillary Clinton because they don't want to wind up dead in Fort Marcy Park. But as Title 18, Section 793 makes it clear, intent is not an issue. It says by accident, by negligence, by carelessness. And James Comey defended everything Hillary had done by saying she's careless and negligent and reckless. And it's germane today because Congress now has the notes from the FBI's interview of Hillary Clinton, and they're saying that the issue of intent was never even brought up by the FBI questioners. It was never even addressed. Now, either FBI Director Comey is ignorant of the law, in which case I'm available to take over his job, or he's just hoping you're ignorant of the law because criminal intent is not required to be in violation of Title 18, Section 793, which can carry a 10-year prison sentence. And I want you all to copy this off. We made up a graphic on the front page of What Really Happened. Spread it around. Make it go viral. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so we're talking about how James Comey, even as he laid out the Title 18 violations Hillary had done, claimed he was not going to recommend charges because she didn't mean to do wrong, ignoring the fact that Title 18 does not require criminal intent. And of course, you need to remember he was a member of the board of HSBC when they were caught laundering drug money. And then we have U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who, as U.S. Attorney for New York, gave HSBC a sweetheart deal for deferred prosecution. In other words, they had a case against the bank. And it will never go on the court docket. They paid a fine to say just hold it in legal limbo. Do you see how the drug corruption connection permeates all of this stuff that we are seeing? It's a repeat of prohibition and how corrupted our government became from that. Moving along here, article coming out of the Daily Sheeple, there is a corporate media conspiracy to hide Hillary Clinton's rapidly failing health. And yes, there is. They won't talk about any of the issues. They won't talk about the Fresnel prism in her eyeglasses. They won't talk about the emails that confirm she was looking at a Parkinson's disease drug a few years back. The whole corporate media are on board shoving Hillary Clinton down our throats, because that whole corrupted system is deathly afraid of Donald Trump. If we can get him into the White House, if we can get him in Congress who's willing to work with them, we can start tearing that whole narcocracy apart. Just dig it out of our society and throw it in the trash bin where it deserves to go. And, I mean, to show you how desperate they are, CNN won't talk about Hillary's health questions. They came out and said, Hillary's health is absolutely fine. It's Donald Trump who's concealing illnesses. We need to look at him. There has to be something wrong with him. Have you seen how Donald Trump hops around that podium, up and down the stairs on his plane, running around? This is a guy in good shape. Contrast that with Hillary, who's literally being held up while she makes speeches. Now, WikiLeaks has released more information about Hillary's health, and basically, apparently back in 2012, Hillary Clinton reached out to the commissioner of the National Football League for advice on how to deal with serious head injuries. And then there was the issue about the medication to treat Parkinson's disease. I'm sure from the establishment's point of view, their attitude is, look, puppet rulers don't need to have a working brain. You people are just being picky. We could have a wooden doll up there and it wouldn't make any difference because the decisions are being made by drug lords and money launderers and crooked financiers and the rest of it. Article coming out of Target Liberty, and they're talking about Hillary's fundraiser. She's still out there raising funds. She was out in Los Angeles, and all the big movie stars were out there standing with her and giving her heaps and heaps of money. And they're talking about these $50,000 per person fundraising meals for which you got a little sort of al fresco snack plate. And that was it. But, you know, there's something you need to consider. People are still pouring money all over Hillary because they're seeing the corporate media polls that say Hillary is leading. What happens when all these donors find out that the corporate media polls are as phony as Hillary herself and they are the victims of a massive fraud? What happens when they all decide to sue to get their money back? Because fraud negates consent. If the corporate media polls are fraudulent, then everybody who's donated to the Hillary campaign has legal grounds to get their money back, and they should. Now, earlier in the week, there was a big stink about how there was a slide presentation regarding threats to the nation that included a slide described as internal threats. And one of those was Hillary Clinton as an internal threat to the United States of America. Apparently, I'm not the only person who thinks she was selling U.S. secrets to other countries with that weak email server and using the foundation to collect and launder the payments. More about this slide when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I need to step back to the Hillary health issue because some stuff is just now breaking. We were talking about how CNN is out there saying, Hillary's just absolutely fine. She's wonderful. We need to find out what's wrong with Donald Trump. He sure looks sick to me. And proving that even corporate media knows no bounds when it comes to absolute idiocy. CNN's new political analyst, Kirsten Powers, is now out there saying that questioning Hillary Clinton's health is sexist. It's sexist to question her health. You know, why aren't you questioning Donald Trump's health? Well, because Donald Trump isn't falling down and acting bizarre. He looks like he's a healthy guy. The Drudge Report just put up a photo on their main page of Hillary Clinton getting into one of her armored SUVs following her speech, and she's having to use a stool to get up from the ground into the SUV. That's why we're asking these questions here. All right, so we're talking about this story that came out earlier in the week where the Army had a slide presentation, internal, about threats to the nation, and they had a slide on the internal threats. And there were a bunch of people who represented a threat to the United States from within, and included in that list was Hillary Clinton. And it went viral, and the Army changed the slide to delete her picture. Then they deleted the slide completely because there were a lot of other people on there who got upset. But an Army spokesman is confirming that, yes, it was a real slide, and she was put on there for some very good reasons. Now, Scott Adams has come out with a very interesting observation, and it ties in with what I was saying about turning down the sound and just watching Hillary's body language, and the fact that her speech today was basically platitudes, jingoism. And Scott Adams was saying 6 months ago, the popular perception was Donald Trump was nothing but a talking suit full of money and insults. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the experienced politician full of policy substances. Today, they have changed places. Donald Trump is the one who's talking serious policy, and Hillary Clinton is out there just puffing around, hurling insults. Now, we were talking about a video that was shot out at Las Vegas showing there was a group of people registering voters. Now, under the law, voter registration programs are supposed to be nonpartisan. And somebody is funding a voter registration drive that is clearly pro-Hillary, and it's turned up again at the University of Cincinnati. Somebody got it on video. We all need to be doing this, where they had a table set up, register to vote, and the table was covered with all of this anti-Trump, pro-Hillary stuff. That's a violation of the law. And I think we can safely assume that anybody who registers as a Republican, that registration is going to disappear. Look how many registrations vanished during the primaries. They're not even trying to hide the vote fraud any longer. What's Hillary's people trying to do? Actually start an armed revolution in this country? Because if they do, the blood is going to be on their hands. Not that they care. I mean, Hillary's being supported by drug dealers, money launderers, dangerous vaccine makers, GMO salesmen, and all these idiotic feminists who would vote the Manson girls into Congress because they're women. These are not people who are thinking. They just want to be right. They just want to be part of this historical moment of a woman in the White House. What a tragedy that this particular woman was chosen to be the standard bearer for the first woman president of the United States of America. If they'd been smart, they would have gone with Linda Lingle. Now, down in Florida, which is a battleground state, the latest polls not being run by the Hillary Clinton campaign or the corporate media have Donald Trump leading overall by 3 points, which is not enough to overcome the vote fraud, so Floridians, you're going to have to work a lot harder. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump is getting 20% of the black vote and 40% of the Hispanics. And the reason for that is pretty simple. Black voters do not think Hillary Clinton will keep any of her promises that she's made to them. They're picking up on the deliberate race baiting to try and herd them like animals to Hillary's side. And they don't want to be treated like animals anymore. Now, the swing by Latinos toward Donald Trump is also easy to understand. The Latinos who are in the United States legally are sick and tired of being tarnished with all this illegal immigration problem. They're all being bunched together. They do not like it. They do not like the fact that somebody sees a Latino, they assume they're an illegal. That's a slap in the face to those Latinos who came into this country through the legal immigration process. And all these illegal immigrants are now competition for the jobs the legal Latinos will take. And that's why they're starting to support Donald Trump. So Trump is up in Florida. He's up in Arizona. He's had a big jump in Utah. All the numbers are up. Unless you're looking at the corporate media, in which case you're going to be told, oh, Hillary's just way out there, you Donald Trump supporters, you might as well stay home on Election Day. It's a complete waste of your time to go to the polls. Daily Cost, which we know is this propaganda outfit, is out there saying Hillary is now at 88%. And I have a message for the Daily Cost. For propaganda to work, it has to be believable, and claiming that Hillary is at 88%, that's just not there. And the skullduggery is continuing to move apace, because down in Minnesota, as it turns out, Donald Trump's name is not on the ballot. How do you think that might happen? Now, the Minnesota election authorities are saying, oh, it's just a snafu, it's just a simple oversight here. I don't think so, and the reason I think that is Donald Trump is the official candidate of the Republican Party. And the official candidates are always automatically on the ballot in every single state. There doesn't have to be a petition drive. And the Minnesota ballot right now, and even up on the website, they have Hillary Clinton and all of the third-party candidates, but no Donald Trump. Ooh, gee, our bad. We'll try and fix it. It's not an accident. It's more of the skullduggery that we have come to see as the hallmark of the Hillary Clinton supporters. Now, remember a while back, Sheldon Adelson pledged he was going to give Donald Trump $100 million, and this sparked an online propaganda campaign to the effect that, see, Donald Trump is just as much in the pocket of Israel as Hillary Clinton. You can't vote for him. At least with Hillary Clinton, you'll have somebody that's openly in the pocket of Israel. And as it turns out, looking at Donald Trump's campaign's financial record, Sheldon Adelson may have made a promise to give him $100 million in order to fuel this particular line of propaganda. So far, he hasn't donated as much as a dime. So, that's where we are. Now, Donald Trump had a little bit of a malapropism when he was talking yesterday about Hillary Clinton's email server. He meant to say that she set up this email server as an act of premeditation, and instead he said premedication. And then he backed off and said, you know, I think I prefer it that way. And the audience laughed like crazy. He turned it around, he turned it into a joke, and everybody went along with it. And that is one of Trump's best qualities. He can think on his feet. He doesn't need a handler to grab him by the elbow and whisper in his ears, you're okay, keep talking, like a certain other candidate that we've seen that happen to. He's his own man. He's got his own mind. He's thinking. It's not just parroting whatever comes in over his hidden earpiece. Now, you remember UBS, big, huge scandal. There's a whistleblower that's come forward saying that UBS was a huge supporter of Senator Barack Obama, essentially putting him on the UBS payroll. UBS was a fundraiser for Obama during his 2008 election campaign. In other words, the political prostitution from UBS went all the way up to the White House. I know this day and age you're not going to be surprised about it. But we're hammering home the message. Everybody who's an establishment politician is corrupt. Anybody who wasn't got kicked out long ago, like Ron Paul and Cynthia McKinney. And they are absolutely terrified of Donald Trump coming into the White House because he's not a career establishment politician. They have been trying to find something on him. Washington Post detailed no less than 33 reporters to dig up dirt on Donald Trump, and all they caught was that one time when his father was arrested at a KKK rally 9 years before Donald Trump himself was born. And they couldn't even verify that Donald Trump's father was actually a member of the KKK. He just got caught up in the fight. And he was arrested and then let go. So let's turn over here to the war zones. Article coming on out from Russia Insider. The Syria no-fly zone is a last-ditch U.S. effort to save al-Qaeda. And they're absolutely right. Syria, with the welcomed assistance of Russia, were on the verge of just shoving all these U.S.-backed terrorists out of Syria. It was shaping up to be this generation's version of Vietnam and would have seriously crippled the rush to war in Iran, for example. But they've gone on in, they've simply commandeered part of a foreign nation, that's called an invasion, that's an act of war, and declared the no-fly zone. Because apparently Obama doesn't want this generation's Vietnam to be part of his legacy, no matter how much it costs other people's money and lives. And that's why they're in there still trying to salvage this. Anybody who's an objective observer of the U.S. war agenda has to know it's in serious, serious trouble. And it's risking nuclear weapons. Now, the U.S. is now admitting that their most recent Syria bombing against a supposed ISIS weapons facility in Raqqa, well, it may have killed a bunch of civilians. You know, golly gee whiz, we're so sorry. Our pilots got really bad eyesight, and you know what poor quality all of our latest weapons are, and that's why they keep missing ISIS and Al-Qaeda and killing the Syrian people and blowing up Syrian infrastructure. Instead, honest, really. And anybody who doesn't agree, you're just being a wacky tinfoil hat, kook, wingnut conspiracy theorist. Large numbers of civilians are leaving the ISIS-controlled areas of Aleppo for safer regions. They're having to be protected by the Syrian army because the U.S.-backed terrorist groups are basically sniping at civilians who are trying to leave. You try and leave and go someplace else, they're shooting them down in the streets, so they're having to be protected by the army. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. U.S.-Turkey launch... okay. I just got a tech message from our control room. I wondered why people weren't calling in. Isn't it great to live in a third world fascist dictatorship where nothing works? Anyway, so U.S. and Turkey have launched what they're calling Operation ISIS Shield, which is telegraphing they're there to protect the U.S.-backed terrorist groups. And even though they claim they're fighting ISIS, the reality is they're bombing the moderate Arabs and the Kurds. But trust us, we're after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Really, we wouldn't lie to you. We're the U.S. government here. The Pentagon has now admitted that there are literally hundreds of thousands of U.S. guns that have gone missing in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're not talking 10, we're not talking 100, we're talking hundreds of thousands. And they're blaming on lapses in accountability. Really? Maybe they should have as tight control over those weapons of war in the war zones as they have on guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens here in the United States, because you'd never lose a one that way, would you? Now, amid continuing friction over just what it is that Erdogan thinks he's doing, Germany is considering pulling out from a Turkish air base that they have been using as a staging area for coalition attacks against Syria and Assad. So Germany may be getting cold feet about this whole issue. Something that is very, very troubling. This story is coming out of FortRuss.com. There are strong indications that the Ukrainian army is getting ready to basically invade Donbass tonight, possibly happening right now. Apparently, several columns of Ukrainian personnel and armored vehicles were seen moving in the direction of Avdiivka, and it may be that Poroshenko is really going to kick this thing up for real in his hope that Putin will respond, and that will open the door to direct war between the U.S. and Russia, which I don't think any of us really want to be doing right now. The U.S. is still trying to make a big deal over this incident over in the Straits of Hormuz, where 3 Iranian patrol boats came within 300 yards of a U.S. destroyer. And the destroyer was feeling so threatened. And now they've added to it the idea that the destroyer had to fire a warning shot at the Iranian patrol boats. And they're trying to make a really big... First of all, those Iranian patrol boats, they're basically glorified speedboats. They are not, in any way, shape, or form, a threat to a U.S. destroyer. They're just anxious to get the war with Iran cranked up, and this is just another excuse to try and get that going. Alrighty, and let's just do that. But 300 yards, first of all, as I mentioned the other day, if you look at a map of the Straits of Hormuz that includes the territorial water boundaries, you will see that the actual channel for international shipping is very, very narrow. You're all going to be passing very close to each other, and hopefully you're going to be following the rules of the sea lanes in order to avoid a collision. But this idea that these boats came within 300 yards, that's not going to be unusual. This is the U.S. trying to gin up more anti-Iranian propaganda, leading to an invasion, a war. The war agenda is still on. From the point of view of the U.S. government, they've gone too far. They can't turn around. They can't go back without the U.S. economy imploding. So they're seeing it, we have to go on until we win or we're defeated. And I think they're going to be defeated, and we're all going to pay the price for that. All right, we got to take a break for commercials here. We got a caller waiting on the line. The phones apparently are working again, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently we lost our caller who was holding on the line, and I don't know what the issue with the phones is, but we're just going to try and deal with it the best that we can. I had somebody who wrote in to remind me that under the international rules of the sea, especially when you're in a channel, that it is considered perfectly normal to come within 50 meters between two vessels. That's considered a safe distance. And the Iranian vessels were 6 times as far away. So this is the U.S. once again trying to create something that out of a non-issue. All righty, China is now issuing a warning to Japan that if Japan joins the U.S. in freedom of navigation exercises in the South China Sea, that will be China's red line. I think we're going to be running out of red ink very soon. Everybody's drawing a red line. I dare you to cross that line. Now try and cross this one. Now you have to cross this one and that one there. All these... You know, I feel sorry for kids right now. Trying to act like adults in a world whose leaders are behaving like spoiled children. What an example our leaders in government are setting for the next generation. If you're a parent, you got to be thinking about that one. All right, let's talk about the economy. And going on over here, I was looking at the stock market earlier today, and it wasn't all that good. Let's see. There, yeah. Okay. Basically, there's an article that came out of MarketWatch.com. Stocks waver as Fed officials hint that time is ripe for a rate hike. Now, this is a really complicated balancing act. And, all right, I'm getting a message here from our control room that our 800 number is down again. And if you want to call into the show, the number to call is area code 512-716-1603. And it's a different number than we gave you the other day. And I'm not getting the details, but apparently there's a real issue with our phone system at RBN today. So 512-716-1603. So the stocks are kind of fluttering, and the Fed is talking about a rate hike. And here's the problem. In order to make the dollar attractive as an investment to other countries, it has to pay a reasonable interest for those who are playing with it. But when they raise the interest on the dollar, it slams the stock market, because the stock market is being propped up by the availability of virtually zero-cost money to play with to keep the stock market propped up for the election. And they're trying to find an ideal in there that keeps everybody happy. But we all know at some point those two requirements are going to cross over each other, and that's when it's going to start coming apart. We're going to take a break for our top-of-the-hour station identification, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2, and the phone lines are working, but you're going to have to use a different number. It's not toll-free. It's 512-716-1603. And just try and get in on that line. And again, I don't know what's going on with the phone system, but I think it's symptomatic of the fact that our nation is just crumbling into ruin, because the wealth of the nation is being taken by the money junkies and spent on war, Wall Street, and Israel. And there's just nothing left for ordinary people. Besides, you all talk on the phones way, way too much. You say bad things about the government, so you don't need a telephone anyway. So we're talking about the economy. We're talking about how the Fed is starting to hem and haw about a rate hike, and as usual, the stock market is dipping down because the stock market is being manipulated for political purposes. It's way overvalued. The stocks are being bought and sold for prices completely out of line with the underlying worth. And so anytime the cost of borrowing money to play those games goes up, the traders say, yeah, we're losing money. Let's stop doing it. The largest Saudi bank has now crashed to a record low. And part of the problem is everybody's been playing these little games to try and make the economy look good. Certainly they're doing it here in the U.S. ahead of November. But sooner or later, the games stop working. The entire economic system, if you think about it, to use a computer term, it's a state machine. And everything that you do to the market will have a response to. That's why technical analysis stops working when you do too much of any one method. Somebody will come up with a technical analysis that's really good at picking winning stocks. And then everybody will want to buy it, and they'll all start using it, and all of a sudden it stops working. Because
What's up, guys?
Okay. The gremlins are out there today. What can I tell you? All righty. So anytime you put any kind of trade on the market reacts to it. And that's what's happening here. All the little games that they're playing to try and keep things looking good, they don't work anymore because the market has adapted to them. And we're talking about activity that's happening outside human agency. There isn't somebody in office saying, oh, they're doing this, let's do that. It's the system itself. Now, Sears is in serious, serious trouble, but apparently they're going to make one more desperate gasp at a good Christmas shopping season. They have borrowed another $300 million to keep themselves afloat and try and head into the Christmas shopping season. And I admire their optimism, but the reality is that Americans just don't have money to buy stuff for the holidays anymore. We're tapped out. And, okay, I'm being told the phones are in the middle of moving to a new carrier, but there's a compatibility issue. Gosh darn that Microsoft Windows 10. Okay, we got Steve in Texas back. Steve, let's take a phone call. Aloha, what's on your mind?
You there?
Yes, I'm here. Are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Finally.
I was blessed with being able to have the afternoon off, and I was able to watch the whole Trump speech, and it was wonderful. And then I had to hold my breath to watch Hillary Clinton. It just, it was a flat moment. It was amazing, the two parallels between the crowd of people. How, the Trump camp, it was boisterous. It was loud. It was wonderful. It was like, not some type of hippie-ish kind of like love fest or nothing like that, but it just you could feel the resonance of what was going on there. And then I had to sit and watch the Hillary speech, which was this flat, almost like pita bread with no leavening, man.
It's like I said, she's just out there repeating these platitudes. She can't talk about what's really going on, her health, other than say it's a conspiracy theory. All she can do is hurl insults. And like I said, she started out her speech with a flat-out lie, trying to blame the Obama birther conspiracy on Donald Trump, when even the Washington Post said this all came out of Hillary's campaign in 2008, and it was nonsense then, and it's nonsense now. And what Hillary just demonstrated to us all is she is incapable of ever being truthful. Her brain is on autopilot. Lie some more.
I had to hold my breath last night, too, to listen to the Hillary little interview on CNN last night. And it was just like, are you kidding me? This is not a press conference. The beautiful thing I love about Trump is he brings a bunch of people out and lets them ask any question they want. They're not filtered. And he goes and he dukes it out with them. Oh, Hillary calls in from her bed. She's probably sitting up with pillows around her back and sitting around, I don't know, whatever it is she does.
Well, I think Hillary's attitude is, why should I waste my time with rallies and news conferences? I'm going to steal the election anyway. Why waste my precious time?
It's just pathetic. And the weird thing is I have to work with people that actually, they're at the point where they're actually afraid to say anything. And honestly, I too am at that way because I don't want to cause friction. You know what I'm saying? I have to work there. I have to be professional. I have to do my job.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like there's this numbingness. It's just like, are you kidding me? It's just like, I miss the days of the 60s and 70s, honestly. That's how aged I am, okay?
Yeah, well, I know that feeling, but you know what they say, if you can remember the 60s, you weren't really there. Anyway, we need to do a quick shout-out here to our honor affiliates who are rejoining our network. And is there anything else you wanted to share with us, Steve?
Yeah, I hope that John in Barbados calls in today so we can hear his opinion, please.
He's next, right after you.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, and we're going to switch to John in Barbados. John, you called in at just the right, perfect time. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. All these telephone issues that you are getting, it's looking to me like a deliberate attempt.
No, not in this case. Not in this case. The hacker attacks on my server, that's deliberate. Somebody's been trying to jam up the BAM user feed and everything, but this is just the fact that we've allowed our technology to become bloated and decadent to the point where we really have lost the ability to efficiently maintain it. And I've got some more stories about that in hour number 3.
Well, I'm looking at the fact that the mainstream news media, particularly the newspapers now, are stopping the people from making comments on the comment section, the blogs underneath the articles. And it seems strange that they're trying to, if you like, that circumstances are conspiring against you and your call-in people who are, if you like, equivalent to the bloggers on the news media. So there we go. It looks rather strange. And
well, the corporate media has been banning individual posters from their comment section for a long time. As one example, I've been banned from Reuters for going on 2 years. They don't want to hear a thing I have to say. They just need to leave room for all the paid online shills from Hillary's Correct the Record PAC. And they're out there openly admitting, we got $1 million and we're hiring people to go on out and post pro-Hillary and anti-Trump stuff in all the corporate media. But the latest trend is, because there are so many angry people getting onto those comment sections, and they so outnumber the hired paid shills, a lot of these corporate media outlets, they're just dropping the comment section completely. They're trying to go back to the old model. We will tell you this, and you are not allowed to provide any feedback. They've gone back to the 1950s.
Well, I wear it as a badge of honor. I mean, I've been banned from so many sites. I have to use sneaky methods to get in there again. But it's a laugh, really, because when you look at the comments down the line, there are angry people there. There are people there with common sense ideas of how to fix this situation, and they just get blindsided.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy theory, blah, 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 blah. Once you understand that people are paid to be on these comment sections in the corporate media, it's immediately obvious who they are. They're the ones who are standing there with their hair on fire, insisting they cannot smell any smoke.
And my final comment would be about one of the war zones against Syria. What I'm getting from various news outlets, other than the mainstream, is that at the moment there is a ceasefire going on in the Aleppo district and Aleppo city.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, and the Syrian Arab Army and the Russians now are helping people leave, but a lot of people don't want to leave. They this is our home and we stay here, even though the danger that they face is critical in places. Because what I'm told now is that the Al-Qaeda, ISIS duopoly are using chemical weapons again to bombard centers of population in Aleppo city.
But I'm sure the corporate media will insist it's Bashar al-Assad who's doing this.
Well, I think there are enough observers out there now to just blow that out of the water. So here we go again with another piece of nonsense coming out of the corporate media. And again, people don't understand how much information is withheld from the American people by the media.
Oh, they're learning. They are learning.
If they understood, there'd be a revolution by 12 o'clock tonight.
Well, I'd still like to avoid a revolution, but if they basically just say, Hillary's the president, get used to it, I think there may be one in this country. Because nobody's going to believe that this government is legitimate when the government says, we get to pick your leaders for you. Because that's clearly the hallmark of a dictatorship.
And one of the biggest shocks I had today was actually watching that clip with Hillary Clinton and Anderson Cooper. Anderson Cooper surprised me. We know he's a CIA asset. And yet he actually went gently after Clinton about her foundation and the relationship between the foundation and her when she was Secretary of State, and all the people involved with her in that position of Secretary of State. Because a lot of the people were part of both organizations. It's crazy. How can you have this corrupt relationship between a public servant and a private organization? We won't call it a charity, a slush fund.
That's exactly what it is. It's a slush fund. What I think may be going on here, and this is only a theory at this point, I think there's a large part of the government that realizes that the Clintons have become a serious danger. With that army slide of Hillary Clinton being an internal threat to the nation, that seems to be a common thought. And I think they understand they dare not touch that email server issue, because it could unravel to the revelation that Hillary Clinton was repeating the 1996 Chinagate scandal and selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests, using the weak email server to deliver and the charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. And a scandal of that magnitude, a serving Secretary of State selling out her country, that could bring the entire government down. So they're looking for a safer way to ease her out of the political scene. And they apparently are focusing on the Clinton Foundation to do it, in the hope that with enough of this pay-for-play stuff, Hillary will be brought down in a way that doesn't risk exposure of the far worse crime of basically treason.
Well, I think it's going to be a difficult job, because not only did Goosey for 1 and Goosey for 2 now release such a lot of information, which does tie Hillary Clinton to this weak email server, which was open to everyone. I mean, he said there was at least 10 foreign IPs floating around inside her server. I mean, do you need any more evidence? You know, if people are floating around, foreign people, obviously the information, including the classified information, is going out to foreign entities. It's just an open and shut case. How Comey managed to say, well, she didn't really mean it, just is beyond me.
Well, Comey's compromised by his connection with HSBC, so's Loretta Lynch. And like I said, the common thread through all of this is that drug money corruption going all the way back to the 1980s Iran-Contra gun and drug running operation out of Arkansas into Nicaragua. And everybody got a lot of money, and they were able to use that money to buy their way to more power and more wealth and start that process. During Prohibition, the Kennedys did the same thing. Old Joe Kennedy was a rum runner. He made the family fortune that way. And then he was able to literally pay to have his kids get into politics. One of them became president. The other one was on his way. Teddy probably would have made a run at the White House if it hadn't been for Chappaquiddick. That's how this stuff happens. You know, I
have some good news.
Please do.
I have some good news. The people who are bringing the private prosecution against Tony Blair, and of course by association Mr. Bush, have surpassed their crowdfunding source, way past it. They've got oodles of money now to go after this duopoly who
good for them.
Tricked us into this war in Iraq. So it looks like we may get some justice because the British government cannot interfere with a private prosecution.
No, they can't. And, of course, private citizens still have the civil courts here in the United States. But we actually lost one of our most powerful anti-corruption tools back in 1981 when the Supreme Court said that private citizens cannot file criminal charges against anybody anymore. Now, when I was a kid, you know, if somebody broke into your home and the cops said, well, we really don't want to file charges, you could stand up and say, I'm going to file charges, and they would have to let you file criminal charges, which would then enter the justice system. But in 1981, the Supreme Court took that away from us. And what that did was consolidate power in the hands of the Justice Department, because they will, for political reasons, say, we're not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton for espionage and Title 18 violations, but we are going to sue those global warming deniers out of existence. And that...
Well, I think that there was an effective use of this private prosecution when a bunch of people, Palestinians, actually went to court and got a court decision in the UK against Tzipi Livni as a war criminal. And, of course, Tzipi Livni had to cancel her visit to the UK because at the time the government hadn't made their changes to the law, which they rapidly did afterwards.
Yeah, Israel is above the law, you know, and which is what Israel has always claimed.
But at least it was effective initially, and she had to cancel until the law was changed. But I think even then, it could go to the Supreme Court in the UK, which is the House of Lords. And they're not...
I thought Britain had a Supreme Court that was like our U.S. Supreme Court. It's not the House of Lords because it's not an impeachment action against Tony Blair because he's already out of office.
Yeah. No, but actually, the highest court in the land is the House of Lords. It's called the Committee of 25. They form this highest court in the land. They can declare and make laws, what have you, and actually prosecute people.
All right. Well, listen, John, thank you very much for the phone call. I'm glad you were able to get through on the systems here with everything going on today. We're going to have to take a break for commercials, and we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. Here, let's talk about the economic news. Kind of an interesting little story coming out of Zero Hedge, where 4 more of these mega banks have joined what is being described as an anti-dollar alliance. We are seeing more and more of this attempt to break free from the U.S. dollar hegemonic domination of the world's economy. Whether it's BRICS, the Asian Infrastructure Development Bank, all these countries that are doing direct currency swaps without going through the dollar. And now there's this movement among these banks to set up a new international currency based on the blockchain, virtual currencies. And all of this, of course, is outside the control of the U.S. Federal Reserve. And that's really what all these wars are about, if you think about it. Because at the end of World War II, they had this little meeting, Bretton Woods, where the U.S. dollar was declared the global trade and banking currency. Now, back then, it made sense to have a single recognized global currency, because accounts were still being settled with boxes of paper notes or with actual gold bullion. And prior to World War II, the global trade and banking currency had been the British pound. And Roosevelt's deal with Winston Churchill was that if Roosevelt brought the United States into the war with that Pearl Harbor deception, that Churchill would agree to surrender the pound's position as the global trade and banking currency to the U.S. dollar. So they all got together at Bretton Woods, and they all signed the agreement, and the dollar took over as the global trade and banking currency. Now, in this stage of instantaneous global financial transaction with confirmation, the idea of needing a single global currency is obsolete. There's no need for it. But the United States is still trying to pursue this as an agenda, because if everybody has to come to the United States and borrow U.S. dollars at interest, or if people have to come to the United States and give us manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for boxes of these ink and paper notes, the U.S. makes a handy profit off the fact that they own the global trade and banking currency. Of course, it all began to fall apart because the Bretton Woods Agreement had 2 requirements in there. First, that the U.S. government would not overprint the dollar and loot manufactured goods and agricultural produce from the rest of the world for little more than the cost of ink and paper. And the second requirement was the value of the U.S. dollar was tied to gold at $32 per ounce. Now, because the Federal Reserve is not actually a part of the U.S. government, they went ahead and started overprinting dollars like crazy and looting the rest of the world of manufactured goods and agricultural produce in exchange for the cost of ink and paper. Until finally, in the 1970s, the government of France was looking in their vaults and seeing this huge stack of ink and paper that they'd built up in exchange for wine and cheese and Brigitte Bardot movies and whatever else they were sending on out there. And they notified the United States they were going to exercise their option under Bretton Woods to turn in all those paper notes for gold at $32 per ounce. Richard Nixon looked in Fort Knox, realized the U.S. did not have anywhere near the gold to cover all that ink and paper, and ended gold convertibility, which technically was the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement. And that led to 2 other consequences. First, foreign demand for dollars plummeted. And second, those countries that the U.S. was approaching for loans realized that there was no gold left to be pledged as collateral, and they got very nervous about that. So Richard Nixon did 2 things. He started the petrodollar deal, which is the U.S. went to all of the oil-producing nations in the Middle East, and they said, if you sell your oil only for the U.S. dollar and invest those dollars back in the United States economy, we will protect you from Israel. And that created the petrodollar. So people, if they wanted to buy oil from the Middle East, they had to come back to the United States and borrow dollars at interest or trade manufactured goods and agricultural produce to get the paper notes to go buy their oil. The second thing Nixon did is he established the Environmental Protection Agency. And that was not established to protect the environment, but to justify grabbing huge chunks of land and sequestering them away from the American people, the owners, so that that land could be pledged as collateral. And we've seen that continue right up to the current day, where the Bureau of Land Management was grabbing ranch lands because Hillary wanted a Russian uranium company to have them. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Breitbart just came out with an article, and I love the headline, Tinfoil Hillary. And they're basically looking at the speech she just made out of Reno, where she's out there basically saying that the alt-right, bloggers, Brexit, Putin are all part of a global conspiracy against her. It's the return of the vast right-wing conspiracy. Now, Hillary came up with that phrase, the vast right-wing conspiracy, all the way back when Bill Clinton was being accused of sexual improprieties by Paula Jones. And then, of course, it turned out, yeah, Bill had really done all this stuff. But Hillary is out there saying it's all a conspiracy, everybody's out to get her. No, Hillary, you kind of created this situation yourself with all the crimes and corruptions. And either this is just a desperate and pathetic attempt to recycle the vast right-wing conspiracy, or worse, Hillary is showing signs of paranoia. And that is even more troubling, especially if she steals the White House. When you look at some of those Roman emperors like Caligula and how they started behaving when they started suffering from paranoia. Of course, back there, part of the problem was they used lead for some of their drinking vessels and plumbing and whatnot. We know what that will do. But Hillary's either out there regurgitating vast right-wing conspiracy, or she's showing symptoms of severe psychiatric illness. Take your pick. All right, let's get on back here to the economic news. And what I said before about everybody's just trying to make the economy look good for the elections. They have no other agenda out there, and I'm not the only one saying that. Over at Investment Watch blog, they have an article, U.S. Government Endgame Agenda, Make the Economy Look Healthy at All Costs. And everything the government is doing is all about appearances. Looking good, not being good, just looking good, making it look good, with everybody to pay the price after the elections are over. And this is a repeating pattern. We've seen it in years past, where every time we're coming up on a presidential election, the government will just dump money onto the system, make everything look as good as it can, and then, of course, after the election is over, the piper must be paid, and there's usually an economic downturn. But that's how politicians think. I need to look good for the election. I need to find somebody to blame for the failings. That's the problem with having a permanent ruling class of politicians. And it stands in stark contrast with the men who started this country, who were very much like Donald Trump. They were businessmen. Ben Franklin was an inventor and a publisher. Paul Revere was a silversmith. Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer, but he also had a plantation. George Washington also had a plantation and a distillery. These were men who knew how to make things, how to repair things, how to build things, how to start and run businesses. And that's a sharp contrast to our permanent ruling class we have now of hereditary leaders like the Bushes and the Clintons, who've never done anything their entire lives except take money from one group and give it to another group, engage in massive corruption. And that's why they're so afraid of Donald Trump, because if we can get him into that White House, he's going to be seen to be a statesman on the same model as the people who started this country. Hillary's people are already out there saying, oh, he's just a businessman who wants to get into politics. Yeah, that description matches pretty much everybody who signed that Declaration of Independence and that Constitution. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having a government that's representative of the people, including people who work, people who teach, people, doctors. Congress isn't supposed to be a permanent ruling class. It's supposed to be a sampling of the American people. Butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, doctors, road builders, bridge engineers, aviation experts. They're all supposed to be represented in there, so Congress knows what it's doing when it passes a law. Now, as you know, the European Union is on the warpath against Apple Computer, and not just because of the latest snafu with the iPhone 6 touchscreen. Apparently, under European Union laws, Apple and other companies like Amazon and Starbucks are basically in arrears in their European taxes, and Brussels wants to enforce the European Union tax laws, and even though the U.S. government officially blesses the European Union as a stepping stone to the New World Order, the U.S. Treasury Department is issuing warnings of retaliation should the European Commission pursue American companies like Apple and Amazon and Starbucks over tax avoidance, because, after all, taxes are only for the little people. The leaders and the corporations aren't supposed to pay taxes. Only the little people pay. You go after the little people. You leave our precious corporations alone. Meanwhile, a U.S. appeals court has affirmed that RICO judgment has affirmed a RICO judgment against the lawyer behind the Ecuador lawsuit. And the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit has unanimously affirmed a lower court decision which found that the $9.5 billion judgment against Chevron Corporation in Ecuador was the product of fraud and racketeering activity and unenforceable in the United States. We have to protect our corporations. This is probably payback for Ecuador granting asylum to Edward Snowden. All those people who worked to get that judgment against Chevron for the environmental damage they caused down there, and we're not going to give you the money. Money's more important than people, especially Ecuadorian people. Brussels is demanding more money from all the member nations of the European Union to help bail out Greece. And I've mentioned before that if you want a model of what the European Union and its economy is like, think of a wooden boat sitting on the water, and there are 12 holes in the bottom, and there are only 11 corks. And everything the ECB and Brussels can do amounts to grabbing a cork out of one hole and shoving it into another hole in full view of the news cameras saying we're working on solving the problem, but the water still pours on in, and the boat is still going to sink. Because the European Central Bank is a private central bank, and like all private central banks the world over, by design, creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt until the debt destroys the system. And that's what's going on here. It's that old 11th marble issue. Now, Portugal is now rolling the dice in a 3.8 billion pound bid trying to stabilize their banking system. This is along the same lines as when the Federal Reserve came out earlier in the week saying they were going to need another $4 trillion to stabilize the banking system. They're not stabilizing it. They're propping it up. They can't stabilize it because it's based on that unstable principle of creating more debt than money with which to pay the debt. It's a naturally unstable system. And all they can do is just create more money out of thin air to paper it over and look like it's working. And ordinary people suffer the effects of the hyperinflation. And the bankers write themselves huge bonuses because they know it's not going to last much longer. Now, we were talking before about this EpiPen by Mylan Pharmaceuticals. And there was a big stink here because the price of the EpiPen was basically jacked up by a huge, huge amount. It's another example of monopolizing a medication needed by ill people and then gouging them with it. And it created a flashback in the media to where people started dumping the stock of the parent company, Mylan Pharmaceuticals. The investors are panicking that there could be lawsuits and other legal issue. They bailed out. Mylan Pharmaceuticals has lost nearly $3 billion. And that's a good punishment for a corporation that behaves the way some of these corporations do. We used to have laws in this country against monopolies for the very reason that monopolies will take advantage of that situation. Those laws have apparently gone away, and you will feel the pain next year because next year, a third of Americans, when they're looking about for an Obamacare plan, they'll have only one choice available to them. And it will be at high cost, high deductible. Because that's the whole point of creating a monopoly, to be able to charge whatever price you want. Competition. Oh, competition makes us work harder to produce better products. It makes us keep our prices low. We can't have competition in the United States of America. It's a silly idea. Israel's actually using the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to give itself a monopoly in the market of clandestine nuclear weapons. They're the only ones out there selling them. They can charge whatever they want. They were caught trying to sell one to the former government of South Africa. They may have sold North Korea their first nuclear weapon. And they can charge whatever they want because all the other nuclear countries on Earth, they can't sell nuclear weapons because of the Non-Proliferation Agreement. It's a monopoly. Nuclear weapons, diamonds, whatever. So let's talk about the immigration refugee problem all over Europe. In Great Britain, net migration is more than triple the original government estimates. 327,000 more have piled on in, and Theresa May is now ordering the ministers to come up with ways of curbing the numbers, of trying to stop that. Because it's wrecking their economy, it's creating anger and violence and rape. It was a boneheaded idea that you could just take the whole planet and shake it a few times and blur all the people together and all would be well. It was never going to work. Rome has started grabbing some of their migrants and sending them back to Sudan on chartered flights. They're just trying to get them out. And all of these countries in the European Union who are trying to enforce their borders, they're all facing huge fines from Brussels. Jean-Claude Juncker is still out there saying, border is an obsolete idea. It's just one planet. Everybody should be able to go wherever they want. Except, of course, into his house, which is inside a fenced and gated community. Now, as you know, one of the big issues of this election is the Second Amendment and Hillary Clinton's oft-stated comment that she's going to find some way to disarm the American law-abiding citizen and the Bill of Rights be gosh darned. And they're really getting kind of overboard on this. They're reaching a point of hysteria. Gun control advocate Dennis C. I don't have his last name. This is an article that came out of Investment Watch blog. But this gun control advocate on Facebook literally advocated grabbing everybody who owns a gun who's not in law enforcement and put them in a gas chamber. Mass extermination of people who have guns. Now tell me who here is the violent person. Is it the one with the gun or the one with the gas chamber? But if you follow me back to that smuggling operation in the 1980s and realize that our current government leadership are all steeped in drug, crime, corruption, it stands to reason if you have a criminal government, the law-abiding citizen must be punished and controlled. And that's why they're trying to spy on you, take away your right to freedom of speech. Hillary says she's going to shut down all the bloggers if she's president, take away all of our guns. Our society has become completely upside down where the guilty are protected and enriched and honest, working, law-abiding Americans are being punished, whether it's through civil forfeiture, the loss of their constitutional rights, being murdered by out-of-control domestic police departments. If you remember the old Superman comics, they had an aspect that was called Bizarro World, which was this miniature version of Krypton that was sort of a copy, but it was a defective copy. And things were just always backwards inside Bizarro World. And we've become Bizarro America. If you really think about it, if you're my age, and if you are, I feel sorry for you, and you remember what America was when we were kids, criminals got punished. Criminals got put in jail. The law-abiding citizen was left alone. The government didn't spy on them. didn't take their money just because they had too much. That was America. And what we have today is bizarro America. It's completely inverted. Complete opposite of what was intended by those founding fathers. Now, out in California, a judge has issued an arrest warrant for former Riverside County District Attorney Paul Zellerbach. He was supposed to appear in court to answer questions about an eavesdropping operation. It was a warrant mill that he was running. It accounted for nearly 1/5 of all U.S. wiretaps. They were just out there listening to everybody, and he failed to show. And so now there's an arrest warrant out for him. And depending upon exactly what's being protected by his not being there, he may be on his way to the Cayman Islands, or he may be already decaying in Fort Marcy Park. And again, getting back to this issue about drug money corruption in our society, apparently in the Minnesota cities of Eagan and Lakeville and Lawn Lake, 2 Mexican restaurants have been busted as drug fronts. They were laundering drug money. And anybody who understands the dynamics of the drug trade know that there has to be a legitimate business front to explain away the money. And those fronts are usually high-volume cash, convenience stores, office supply, places, multi-screen cinemas make great money laundries, where you just bring in the drug money and you deposit in the bank and say, oh, yeah, we sold this many movie tickets. You know, that new Ghostbusters, man, we just were selling out the seats on that one. So there's always a front business, and they just caught these 2. If you have some kind of a bizarre business in your neighborhood, like ceramic dolls, that you just can't understand how they stay in business, and yet they've been in business for year after year after year, you may be looking at a money laundering front for drug crime. It is everywhere in this country, up to and including the White House. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to our show here. And let's talk about some science and health news, and we're still trying to get our phones back up and running so that you can call into the show here. Now, we've been talking about glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup weed killer. It's the ingredient that the Roundup Ready crops were genetically engineered to survive. And it's already turned out to be a huge disaster because the glyphosate resistance has migrated from the GM crops to the weeds. And so all those farmers who bought Roundup Ready corn or soy or any of that are now basically forced to go back to dosing their farm fields with all kinds of toxic pesticides, because the weeds and the pests have evolved and adapted to tolerate glyphosate. And Monsanto knew that this was not going to be a permanent technology, but they made money off of that. Alrighty, one more time, our phone number, if you want to join me for hour number 3, we're coming up on, is area code 512-716-1603, and if you get a busy signal, just try and call in again, because there are issues. What can I tell you? I think we need to buy a new mutant hamster for that wire wheel behind the mixer. So anyway, we're talking about glyphosate. There are now lawsuits being filed against Monsanto by workers, farm workers, agricultural workers, who were exposed heavily to glyphosate, and they've come down with cancer. And basically, following on, the World Health Organization has been describing glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen since 2015. And Monsanto fought tooth and nail against that. The World Health Organization was going to declare glyphosate a human carcinogen, and the compromise was, we'll just say probable so that we can work in that little gray area. But there is certainly, from an epidemiological perspective, a clear link between glyphosate and these illnesses. Now, Brazilian health officials have come on out and actually declared the Zika virus is not responsible for the sudden increase in birth defects, including microcephalic babies, that they're seeing down there. They're saying it has to be something else going on. And the reasoning is very simple. Zika has been around for 70 years. It's actually a very mild illness. Even the CDC admits most humans will self-immunize against it when exposed. You might not even know that you're sick. But there was this sudden surge in birth defects down in Brazil, and it was blamed on Zika, and that was done to protect corporate interests. Again, we're going to take a break for our top-of-the-hour station identification. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone line is open. Area code 512-716-1603. And we're seeing a lot of stuff coming on out. We're talking about science and health this segment. We're talking about how Brazilian health officials have come on out and declared flat out the Zika virus is not responsible for the surge in birth defects they experienced down there, including these microcephalic babies. And they're pointing out, again, Zika is 70 years old. It's never caused these problems before. Zika is spreading all across Brazil, but the birth defects are confined to certain areas. And one of the factors that is being looked at askance is that the year before the microcephalic babies started appearing, Brazil mandated a vaccination program for expectant mothers. But we're not allowed to question the vaccine companies. Now, as you know, up in Florida, they've been screaming Zika, 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 and they're starting to spray Florida with an insecticide, Nalid, which actually can cause all of the symptoms being blamed on Zika, including birth defects. And a lot of people were saying, what the heck is going on? How do you get there? Now, according to FloridaBulldog.org, Governor Rick Scott has a financial interest in a Zika mosquito control company in which his wife, Florida First Lady Ann Scott, owns a multi-million-dollar stake through a private investment firm she co-owns. In other words, Governor Scott's wife is going to make a huge fortune off the fact that Governor Scott is spraying the people of Florida with a dangerous pesticide to deal with a non-existent or relatively minor crisis. Now, over at Natural News, they've been running tests, and they have confirmed now. Facebook has gone total George Orwell. Any stories mentioning the keyword phrase mandatory vaccinations is being blocked. We can't upset the corporations. The corporations are good. Starting to remind me of the movie Rollerball, the original one, the James Caan one. There was some brilliant writing in that screenplay. Now, over in Indiana, and boy, they're dealing with a lot of problems there. They got tornadoes there today. We have family there. We're kind of concerned about them. But apparently, residents of the West Calumet housing complex in East Chicago, Indiana, have just been warned they must vacate their homes for demolition because of hazardous levels of lead and arsenic in the soil. The problem is that contamination has been going on for 10 years. And so everybody's wondering, why all of a sudden are they being kicked off the land? Is it really for their safety, or does somebody want that land for something else? But it does show that underneath this narcocracy that we have been living under for the last quarter of a century, concern for the health of ordinary Americans is just not a factor any longer. Corporations make stuff, they just dump the toxins wherever they go. The Environmental Protection Agency doesn't protect the environment. It's in charge of the land grab to collateralize more government borrowing. They take a lot of that toxic waste that can't be disposed of anywhere else, and they contract with the fracking companies to pump it down into those wastewater wells. The problem is it won't stay there. It's amazing. Now, we were talking the other day about this protest regarding the Dakota Access Pipeline, and it got really intense because the Lakota Sioux were blocking this planned route of a pipeline because it was going to cross upstream of their principal water supply. And pipelines leak, especially when they're being built as cheaply as modern construction tends to be in the oil industry. Think Deepwater Horizon and how reckless they were with that. And the state's Department of Homeland Security tried to get rid of the protesters because they were interfering with a corporation. There were arrests. They took away the water supply and just hoped that the heat would drive them away. That didn't work. And finally, there's a victory because the project's developer, Energy Transfer Partners of Dallas, has agreed to halt construction for at least a week in order that they can have hearings and look for some alternative routing. And it's another reminder, like Brexit, that if you get enough people together, you can, in fact, force a change on a corrupted corporate government structure. And by the way, Nigel Farage was down with Donald Trump on the campaign trail. And he's hitting that point as well when you're looking at all the massive election fraud that we're seeing this year. And an establishment that is in absolute goose step with Hillary Clinton to get her the White House and keep Donald Trump out. Nigel Farage reminded everybody of how it was just assumed Brexit was going to fail in Great Britain. They were rigging the elections, the propaganda was against it, and still the British people stood up and said, no, we're going to make our own choices now. And it's time for the American people to do exactly the same thing. We know the corporate media is lying to us. We know the elections are being rigged. We also know that an overwhelming landslide will overcome the election rigging. If Donald Trump wins the White House by 80%, they can't reverse that and give it to Hillary without everybody knowing what was done and triggering a revolution. So Nigel Farage is out there saying, we can do it. This constant propaganda we're getting from the Hillary people of, oh, she's already won, just stay at home. You really don't need to go on out there. And by the way, for everybody who is registering to vote this year, find a way to verify that your registration has really gone through, because one of the problems with all of these voter registration groups who are openly working for Hillary Clinton and against Donald Trump is you have no way of knowing if your completed registration form goes into the nearest trash can. Look at how many of these primaries during the Democratic primary, how many of these states where people were being showing up and being told the registration doesn't exist. So whatever mechanism your state has to verify that you are a registered voter, use it. Take the time to make sure you are registered to vote in the November election. Because voter suppression, that's one of the things that has been documented about the Democratic primaries. They were blocking people from voting. Their registrations vanished. Their registrations changed. Hillary wants that White House. Hillary's supporters want that White House. They don't want Donald Trump anywhere near it. There is nothing they will not do to steal this election. And they're not even really trying to hide it any longer. So anyway, congratulations to the Lakota Sioux. It's not a permanent fix, but at least they got the corporate and government interests to back off and say, all right, we really should talk this thing out here. Now, in the world of human-caused global warming, we're already starting to see snow hit northern Europe, Canada, unusual for August. Winter storm up there in Alaska, 8 inches of snow, also unusual for August. And we're looking at all these boondoggle projects that have been put forward on the basis of human-caused global warming. Windmills. Oh, everybody's going to have a windmill. Those are not penciling out. The electricity from those windmills is actually more costly than other means because the windmills are wearing out a lot faster than they were supposed to. In one category of windmill, the company that built them has gone out of business. You can't even get parts for it anymore. And there are now thousands and thousands of these windmills sitting across America that aren't doing anything. We got a big wind farm down on the Big Island. It's corroding away. Never penciled out. Ethanol in the fuel supply turned out to be another boondoggle because it's not carbon neutral. When you add in the energy to process the corn to get the ethanol, there's a huge carbon footprint there. And ethanol is not as energetic as gasoline, so you have to buy and burn more of it to get the same amount of work that you would out of ordinary gasoline. And finally, these ethanol-boosted fuels harm your cars. They wreck the soft components of the fuel system, especially on the older model cars. And even some of the newer cars, brand new this year, have a warning in the fine print that if your gasoline that you're using is above a certain level of ethanol content, it voids the warranty on the engine. And I'm sure from the U.S. government's point of view, that's good for the economy. It means you've got to go get the car repaired. You have to buy new fuel components. See, anytime we break something or make you sick or take something away from you, it's going to boost the economy because you have to buy something new. Which, as psychotic as that is, works only when the people actually have the ability to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries. We, the American people, are tapped out. We're just barely getting by. Anytime there's a new tax, a new fee, a new price increase on anything, we have to go without something else. We stop buying new clothes. We stop buying newer cars. We make do with what we've got longer. And the net increase in revenues remains the same. The net increase in tax revenues remains the same. It is a failed policy, but they don't know any other thing to do. Okay. Yeah. I'm getting all these emails from people who are trying to call in and they can't reach the phone lines, and I apologize for that, but now then, so getting on back to all these failed ventures, we know of all these solar companies that have failed, Solyndra, and they were all propped up with huge government subsidies. Ultimately, you, the American taxpayer, paid for all these failures. And now there's a new one. You've probably been hearing about the term biofuels. We're going to make fuels for our car out of waste hydrocarbons from other sources. Biodiesel, created from the leftover crops such as corn and soybeans, the plant matter, the non-edible parts. Well, according to a new study from Energy Institute and Professor John DeCicco, this is actually worse for the environment than ordinary gasoline. It's producing far more waste, far more carbon contamination. It's another one of these boondoggles. It sounds really great in the news release, but it doesn't really work. Because when you have a ruling body of professional politicians who do not actually know how to do anything other than be politicians, they're going to go on the soundbite. Oh, we'll have ethanol in the gasoline. Yes, that sounds great. We're going to move forward. They not only don't think these things all the way through, they can't. And I'm sure that there's somebody in the system who's a paid technical advisor, but they're not being listened to. Now, NASA has come on out flip-flopping yet again on the issue of liquid water on Mars. Mars, as you know, has a very warm spot in my heart. And back in 2015, there were photographs taken of Mars that appeared to show running water trickling down the inside of a crater wall. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. Well, NASA is now claiming that data from the Mars Odyssey mission is saying that, well, it may look like water is trickling down the side of the crater, but it's still drier than the driest of Earth's desert, and it's some kind of an optical illusion. Now, liquid water was photographed on the surface of Mars by the rover Opportunity back in 2004. And I'll tell you why NASA keeps whipping back and forth on this issue of water, and for that matter, life on Mars. It's to keep the funding flowing. Right now, most of NASA's funding is to support the claim of human-caused global warming. There are no new major missions on the drawing boards right now. And so what they're trying to do is keep the existing missions going longer by flipping back and forth and saying, we're not really sure. We've got this data that says yes and this data says no, and we need to continue working to resolve the matter. And I think that's what NASA is doing. Never a straight answer. Now, I think, and hopefully if Donald Trump gets the White House, he'll consider this. I think we need to give NASA a huge, huge boost. Let's throw away all that human-caused global warming nonsense and actually get back to space exploration. We're being left behind. China's going to the moon. Russia's building a huge new super booster to go back to the moon. They're talking permanent base. They're already talking eventual manned mission to Mars. And we're getting left behind. And I support a new revived civilian space program, maybe under a completely different name. Not because I want to see the American flag out there in space, but because of the technological fallout from such activity. Prior to the space program, the leading edge of technological development in the U.S. was military development. And the military likes to keep themselves 10 to 20 years ahead of the civilian market. And what that means is anything invented by the military at taxpayer expense, by the time it's finally declassified and made available to the American public, it is useless in terms of developing a new product on which new industries and new jobs can be created. When NASA was established and Kennedy inspired us to go to the moon, everything that was created to solve the problems of getting to the moon was immediately available to American entrepreneurs with which to invent new products and build new industries and create new jobs. The tech boom of the 70s and 80s and going into the 90s all came out of Project Apollo. Now, the U.S. has allowed other nations to take the lead in manufacturing. Because of Wall Street's short-sightedness and outsourcing, manufacturing in this country has been in serious decline. And those Americans who know how to manufacture have already left this country for greener pastures. Those other countries are not going to be so foolish as to allow it to flow back to the United States, no matter how many tariffs or tax incentives there are. Because the real money that powers an economy is manufacturing products. So the only way the United States is going to regain the lead is to leapfrog ahead into what the next paradigms will be. Photonics in computers, for example. New materials. All of which can be developed with an accelerated space program. The benefits of which are immediately available to the American people because the whole program is the property of the American people. We need some kind of a civilian technology incubator. I can't think of a better one than a renewed interest in the space program. And I'll tell you what could galvanize that. That would be if NASA would finally wipe the egg off of their face, go back and acknowledge that the Viking landers did in fact detect indigenous life on Mars. Because confirmation that there is life out there would be a socially transformative event. And we might all just decide to put down our weapons of war, stop killing each other, and say, let's go find out what's out there. Let's go find out who's out there. And instead of developing something that kills people, we invent something that's actually beneficial. So if anybody from the Trump campaign is listening, that's my recommendation. We're going to need a new civilian technology incubator. And we need a NASA that is less political and more scientific. I was with NASA when they went through the transition from the old NASA, where the scientists and engineers were calling the shots, to the new NASA, where we had all these MBAs and political appointees coming on in saying, we can make space businesslike, which led to a series of major embarrassments and disasters. We need to return to the concept of meritocracy. Those who actually know how to make things work should be in charge, instead of our current system where a bunch of ignorant politicians tell those who actually know how to make things work what to do. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Please call us on the air, 512-716-1603. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We've actually got a caller waiting on the line, but before I take it, somebody just emailed in an absolutely brilliant idea. If you are needing to register for the election in November and you see one of these voter registration tables and it's loaded with pro-Hillary and anti-Donald Trump stuff, just go on up and register as a Democrat. Tell them you love Hillary. They'll put your registration right on through, and then in November you can still vote for Donald Trump. Brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant idea. All right, Mike in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. And I have a double brilliant idea for you, Michael.
Oh, lay it on me.
That is, before anybody decides to go ahead and be allowed to be put on the voter registration rolls, how about proving your citizenship first? Because you can't vote unless you're a citizen.
Oh, don't you know that's racist and exclusionary, and George Soros is funding lawyers to go all over the country and overturn all these laws that say you have to show an ID and prove you're a citizen to vote, or you have to show an ID to prove that you haven't already voted 16 other times under other names.
Well, there's my idea, and if they think they're going to go ahead and let people get their IDs and their driver's licenses and just be put on the voter registration, there's another blowback getting ready to happen, because we're not going to allow that. That's nonsense, and that's an absolute total takeover right there.
You're absolutely right. Motor voter laws, where you're automatically registered to vote when you get your driver's license, that's just to generate a bunch of voter registrations that aren't actually going to be used by the voters in order to make them available for fraud. If you want to vote, you should just take it upon yourself to register to vote. This idea that demanding ID of a voter is somehow discriminatory against minorities is nonsense, because the poor and the minorities are on all these social programs for which ID is required. There's actually no real justification to reject the idea that you have to prove you're a U.S. citizen in order to vote in a U.S. election. And the only reason that they're trying to shut it down is because Hillary understands in an honest election, she is going to be absolutely creamed by Donald Trump. And that's why she's not bothering with rallies and press conferences anymore. She's going to steal it anyway. So why should she waste her time continuing to go through the motions of actually having a campaign?
I will also tell you that I've worked with Donald Trump's former trust advisor for the last 12 years.
Okay.
And just recently, since Donald has put himself as being a presidential running candidate, his former trust advisor, who's a little over 80 years old right now, has always said to me, and recently he said, Donald, he used to meet with him twice a month back in the 1970s for 1 hour. He said he hasn't changed much since then either. He says he's got a lot of good foundation, family man. He pretty much says what he's going to say. He might have to change it slightly, but he's not a politician. He's going to do what he says he's going to do.
Well, I absolutely agree with that, because Donald Trump comes out of the world of business, where if you get a reputation for not keeping your promises, you are history, and that's in sharp contrast with the professional political class, who lie about everything from the moment they wake up to the moment they fall into bed at night. Hillary did it this morning, out there trying to claim that Donald Trump was behind the birther controversy with Barack Obama, even though the Washington Post confirmed it was all started by Hillary's campaign.
I might want to suggest, too, that you might try something, and that is that all your listeners, too, if you put your hands up in front of you, I hate to tell everybody, but you were born a racist, whether you like it or not.
Well, I don't know about...
Good work, Michael.
All right.
Adios, and we'll join you later.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the input on that. And let me just do something real quick here to deal with the tantrum throwers. And there we are. Okay, now, somebody just posted a story, one of the member stories at WhatReallyHappened.com, and this has to do with The Daily Show, which I don't even bother watching anymore. But apparently they tried to alter Donald Trump's words with clever editing to make it sound like he said something that he didn't really, forgetting there was a visible timestamp on the screen that jumps during that edit, revealing that this whole thing was fraudulent. And we're seeing the corporate media literally self-destruct its own credibility. Because if you think, corporate media lives on its credibility. If it doesn't have any, it doesn't have an audience, it doesn't have ad revenues, and yet they're ready to throw that all away for Hillary Clinton. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I think I forgot to do the shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network here. It's been kind of a busy, chaotic day with all the telephone issues and everything else that's going on here. And a reminder one more time for everybody listening that tomorrow's show will be a replay. Claire and I have an appointment we cannot shift because somebody's literally flying in and out of Honolulu Airport just to meet us. And so we couldn't very well have them change that whole thing around. Going back and looking at some of the stories in earlier categories, we're talking about the economy, we're talking about the job crisis. We know that the official unemployment numbers are nonsense. There are more than 94 million legal American citizens willing and able to find work who have not been able to find jobs for months or years. And these people are just banished to this other category so they don't make the numbers look bad going into the election. But there's another aspect to the job numbers, because the jobs that are being lost tend to be long-term, permanent, high-paying jobs. The jobs that are being created are short-term, minimum wage jobs. And that's an aspect of the job market that doesn't get a lot of coverage in the corporate media. And we're now seeing where there was a study done, this is over at Government Slaves, between 2013 and 2015, 3.2 million American workers lost long-term jobs, career path jobs. And now, of course, there's this trend to have temp workers that are available with no guarantee of how long they're going to work. And it's totally to the benefit of the money junkies. There's no protections left for the American worker, unless you're in a union, and even the unions are a mixed blessing here. We're getting word of a suspected assassination attempt on Angela Merkel. Apparently she was visiting the Czech capital, and her motorcade was on her way to the meeting, and somebody in a black 4x4 Mercedes apparently tried to intrude into the motorcade and blend in. And they halted this guy. He had weapons, and they've arrested him, and they're trying to find out what was going on. So, may have been an assassination attempt, may have been a pitiful bid for sympathy by Angela Merkel to try and win more support back home. I don't think so. Now, Julian Assange is out there saying WikiLeaks is going to release a lot more material on Clinton, and he was asked in a recent interview that if the data could be a game changer for the November 8 presidential election. And Julian Assange told Fox News yesterday, I think it's significant. You know, it depends on how it catches fire in the public and in the media. Well, virtually everything that's come out about the Clintons has caught fire in the public, and certainly in the independent media. But we know the corporate media. You could have a videotape of Hillary Clinton dropping live kittens into a blender, and the media would not touch it. They are totally, totally under her control. And again, when you look at the wealth that people who traffic in illicit substances get, they're able to buy the media. Look at some of the stories about drug corruption that took place down in South America, where the drug lords became more popular than the government itself because the drug lords were building schools and hospitals. And yes, they would buy up and own the media. Now, my hat's off to the people of Colombia because they actually put their president on trial for being a drug criminal. Unfortunately, he was found not guilty. Apparently, a lot of the witnesses against him disappeared under mysterious circumstances, but at least they had the guts to try. So are you going to sit there and say the people of Colombia have more courage than the people of the United States of America? I would hope not. I would certainly hope not. Now, a while back, we reported on this very bizarre content in the source code for the official website for Hillary Clinton. And I checked earlier today. It's still there. There's a little announcement up at the top bragging about the hackathon that is occurring between now and November, and including a link to a jobs page for the Hillary Clinton campaign, where they are soliciting programmers and IT people. And it appears to be bragging about attacking her enemy's servers, which they're already doing, and hacking the election itself. And it's still there. Absolutely shameless. Now, we've been talking about Windows 10 and what an absolute disaster it continues to be, especially after the anniversary edition. And this gets back to the comment I made about our technology has become so bloated and decadent and corporatized that we've literally allowed it to grow to a point where we cannot efficiently maintain it and keep it working. And we've been talking about how the Windows 10 anniversary update has disabled millions of webcams, and Microsoft has apologized, which should make you all feel better, but they're not going to have a fix until late next month, if then. Now there's a new problem that's come on out. The Kindle Paperwhite, which you plug into your computer to move information back and forth like you would do your tablets or your smartphone and everything. Apparently the Kindle Paperwhites turn Windows 10 PCs into paperweights. If you plug a Kindle Paperwhite into a Windows 10 PC, it triggers an immediate BSOD. And if you don't know what the acronym means, it's the blue screen of death, meaning a failure at the very lowest levels of the system. Lockup of the CPU, of the memory, something like that. Now, I presume that a complete restart of the computer will bring it back. But apparently, they just can't keep all this stuff sorted out. And we keep hearing about how all these computer companies are letting people go because you, the end user, have now been drafted as the unpaid quality control inspectors for all these products. Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, really? Well, we'll fix it with the next release. Wait for Windows 10, the golden cut. We'll have it all fixed by then. And if you remember Windows XP, when it first came out, horrible, horrible problems. And over the years, eventually, they finally got it to be a stable, reliable operating system, at which point they said, all right, we're ending support for XP. We're on to the new one. Now you know why so many people held on to their XP. There's a new problem for Apple. I alluded to it earlier in the show. Apparently, there is a problem with the iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus with the touch screen. And it seems to be a design flaw in the actual controller chips of the touch screen. And it will basically mean that the touch screens stop being accurate. Sometimes they stop working at all. And if you understand anything about the iPhone, if that touch screen is not working, the iPhone cannot be used. There are no other ways to get around. You can't plug in a keyboard on the side and get your utility back. And because it appears to be a hardware issue, there isn't anything Apple can do about it. I presume that they'll rush out a new improved iPhone 6 without this problem and swap them in. But between now and then, if you have an iPhone 6 or a 6 Plus and the touch screen quits working, there really isn't a whole heck of a lot they can do about it. It reminds me about the very first Pentium chip that came on out and was discovered to have a serious mathematic flaw right in the chip itself. And they had to write a patch to get around it. When Claire and I first started our animation production company, we started using Hewlett-Packard equipment. And the reason I did that is, at that time, I had a very positive relation with Hewlett-Packard equipment. I had Hewlett-Packard calculators. They were wonderful. I still have one today that was really well. But we had the misfortune of building up our company with Hewlett-Packard equipment after Carly Fiorina had taken over. And they were buying manufactured components for their computers from places like Hungary, which is not exactly known as a hotbed of high-tech manufacturing. In fact, it almost seemed to mimic the storyline from Michael Crichton's Disclosure about value engineering to the point of not working. And one of the desktop computers we had just kept freezing up. You'd be in the middle of something and it would just lock. And it was something to do with the motherboard, and there was no way to fix it. Hewlett-Packard just did one of these, these things happen. Just keep saving your work and rebooting. But, you know, rebooting and saving your work is in the same category as running your antivirus or installing software patches. It takes time away from your productivity. And all of this cumulatively is a serious, serious drain on the productivity of the nation as a whole. And why our government doesn't seem to recognize the economic impact of all this lost productivity is a mystery. Of course, then who was that politician who described the internet as a bunch of tubes? Maybe they just don't know any better. I mean, Hillary's in early defense of her email server is that she doesn't understand these things at all. When somebody asked if she'd wiped her email server, she said, with a cloth? Maybe she really is that clueless. There are days I miss the older, simpler computers, like the VIC-20 or my Amiga. I loved my Amiga. I really, really did. And by the way, that VIC-20 I have, that still works. that thing's from the 78, 79, and it still works. As opposed to today, where these machines are designed to basically fall apart after 5 years. Planned obsolescence. And that's another failed policy. When you have a healthy economy, planned obsolescence can work. Get everybody to buy a new one of everything every 3 to 5 years. Design them to fall apart. Literally design high-end automobiles for an 8-year lifespan. Cheaper cars for a 5-year lifespan. They actually, when they're doing the car bodies, they literally control the degree of galvanization on the steel so that after 5 years on the less expensive cars, the galvanization will have worn off and the body will start rusting through. When you have an economy that is under the stress that ours is at, planned obsolescence fails to work. Which also seems to be something that our government has failed to comprehend. All righty, a couple more stories here. Over at the Church of England, it's now come on out that the church leadership ordered bishops never to apologize to sex abuse victims. And that was because under British law and also under American law, an apology can be introduced to court as evidence of guilt, as a confession. And so the Telegraph found this legal advice issued by the Church of England to the bishops saying that you can express regret, but you have to use the approved warning. You never apologize. And we've seen a lot of these churches where they come on out and they try and blame the victim. Oh, the kids wanted it. They were having fun, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of hard to reconcile this claim of being the earthly representative of a supreme moral being with their behavior. And I cite as evidence of that this very bizarre story. This is out of the Daily Mail. Apparently there was this Italian priest who was known for having a relic fetish. Now, relics are a big deal in certain religions, including the Catholic Church, where they'll have little bits and pieces of saints on display, or they'll have some object that somebody was supposed to have used. And apparently this Catholic priest had stolen some sacred statuettes and was discovered by a 92-year-old Italian Monsignor. And this Italian priest proceeded to murder the 92-year-old Monsignor. Broke his neck, strangled him to death. And let's see, how many of the commandments does that break? He coveted, he killed, he stole. It's going to take a lot of Hail Marys not to go down to the dark regions after one of those, I think. Okay. Now, here's a fun story. The world's largest aircraft is this rather distorted blimp-like craft. It's called Airlander 10, and they're trying to get the test flights, and on its second test flight, something happened, and the nose crashed into the ground, and it tore, and it distorted, and everybody's like, ha, 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 ha. Well, you know, there's a value to studying history, because even without the Hindenburg, airship disasters like the Shenandoah reveal why this method of air travel is a bad idea. And it's called the weather. Now, the Hindenburg disaster was blamed on the fact that the U.S. refused to sell helium to Nazi Germany. The Hindenburg was originally designed with helium, and when they were forced to use hydrogen, the added lift allowed them to add some additional cabins, which seemed to work out really well. It's since come on out that what actually brought the Hindenburg down was the paint job on the outer covering, which was an iron oxide primer that was covered with shiny powdered aluminum paint. And if you are a chemist or understand pyrotechnics, you understand that's the recipe for thermite. And if you look at that movie of the Hindenburg coming down, remember, hydrogen when it burns with an almost invisible blue flame. That bright, brilliant, white, smoky fire that you see is not the hydrogen, it's the cloth envelope. And as a matter of fact, the airship company had already issued a directive that the next time the Hindenburg returned to Germany, that outer envelope was going to be replaced with something that was painted with a little less flammability to it. So it was a bad timing issue. The Shenandoah, if you've studied that, it was a U.S. Army airship and was up there, got caught in bad wind, literally tore in half, and the two ends were blown like over into the next state before they came down. I know airships look cool. They're very romantic, but there's a reason why they have given away to heavier than air aircraft. And it has to do with the fact that you can't get them to fight against a stiff wind. I remember when the Goodyear blimp crashed in Southern California. I got to see that one. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Thursday, and a quick reminder that we're going to have a best-of show tomorrow. Claire and I are unavailable. I'm already getting emails. Yes, we will be back live on Monday to continue our show. This is only one day we're having to take away for conflicting business. So getting on back to some of the last headlines coming on in. Apparently Hillary Clinton's entire strategy for the rest of the campaign season is Donald Trump is a racist, Donald Trump is a neo-Nazi, Donald Trump belongs to the KKK, Donald Trump is a white supremacist, Donald Trump tears tags off of his couch cushions, Donald Trump is stealing socks from your dryer, and his mother dresses him funny, and his dog smells bad, and all the rest of this whining. And if that's all she's got to work with, then she's pretty much over and done with. And Scott Adams is absolutely right. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have changed brands. She's now the empty suit shouting insults. And he's the one out there talking about policies. And every time the corporate media tries another stunt to make him look bad, like they did on The Daily Show, it only underscores that the establishment is just completely set against Donald Trump. And I think that's only serving to build support for the American people, because at heart the American people believe in fair play. They believe in honesty, and when they see the entire establishment working to cheat Donald Trump, it's only going to build more support for him. So, let's do this. That was it on that. Let me do this. Sorry about that. I'm taking care of a lot of tech issues. There's a lot of buttons here. Apparently, Saudi Arabia has launched another chemical weapon attack on civilians in Yemen. And apparently, WikiLeaks has released something where Chelsea Clinton was involved in one of the Clinton Foundation scams using a fake name. So Chelsea's getting dragged into this. And yes, she's definitely a Clinton I'm sure Webb Hubble is just so proud right now. New study finds living near a fracking site is tied to migraines and fatigue. Yeah, those are toxic chemicals coming out of the ground, out of your tap water. It's ugly. All right, so we only got about a minute left here, and I'm going to finish up this week by reminding you all that you are part of the independent media now. And that means there are hundreds of millions of Americans who are now part of that independent media. And if we all work together, we can easily shout down the corporate media, even with all their million-dollar budgets. They're in the process of self-destructing. And again, we're seeing the same thing start to happen here in the United States of America that happened in the last days of the former Soviet Union. It's imploding from its own corruption, from its own rot, from its own lies. It is coming down. Have yourselves a good weekend. We'll be back live on Monday here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So take care and aloha, America.